chorus that continues to increase from respective state governments asking the central government to directly procure vaccines from pharma giants, that it's difficult for state governments to do so at an individual level. Amidst this growing chorus, there are some very specific voices that have come in. This includes the Chief Minister of Odisha having called for a centralized policy, in fact, writing off a letter to all his counterparts across states, which is writing to chief ministers of states and union territories here, saying that there has to be a consensus on the centralized procurement of vaccines by the government of India. And this is in view of the challenges that the state governments are facing. Mr. Navin Patnaik there also says that no state is safe unless all states adopt vaccination as a top priority and also executed on a war footing. Also earlier in the day, the Tamil Nadu Chief Minister MK Stalin also wrote to the Union Health Minister here seeking to ensure that the state of Tamil Nadu gets vaccines proportionate to its population. Remember, stocks that have been running dry in several states, because of which they've had to shut down their vaccine drive. But also as far as procurement for the next set of stocks is concerned, state governments would prefer that the central government do that for them. Well, let's get in more voices here. We have Dr. Gul Rasheed, who's the spokesperson of the BJP with us. Dr. Sheikh, many thanks for being with us here. To what extent are you in agreement with what other state governments are now beginning to say, that as far as procurement is concerned, that has been set in motion even for the national immunization policy earlier, that it is always the central government doing procurements, and that's how it should remain for the COVID vaccine as well?
See, first of all, the national immunization policy is a long-term program, and so it can't be compared with the COVID-19 vaccination drive, because this is a different type of disease, and it has came all of a sudden. It has affected the large number of people in a wide area throughout the world. So you can't compare it with normal vaccination procedure. But as far as today's order of the Honorable Supreme Court has been there, I think it's a very good move by the court, because this will make clear the efforts done by the union government, and it will end. I'm optimistic that it will end all the politics which is going on by different political.
But Dr. Sheikh, the question also here being, why were states asked to float these global tenders in the first place, knowing fully well that pharma giants don't engage with state governments, pharma giants only engage with central governments? It was a given that states would face a roadblock in this. Why were they given the go-ahead? And it's effectively been a waste of 1 month's time here on the procurement.
It's not like that. If you are just if you want to say that only Pfizer and Moderna are the vaccines in the world, then you are right. But it's not the case. There are different type of vaccines, different brands of vaccines going around the world. So we should not think that they are the only vaccine producers in the world. If they see, the thing is that I should not use the term, but Pfizer and Moderna has become the Ferrari and Lamborghini of vaccination. That is the reason they are doing all these things, doing all these dramas. But other companies are providing. They are engaging with states as well.
No, but Dr. Sheikh, which are those? No, but which are those other companies? Because these are other companies that have to have bare minimum safety requirements, that have to have a WHO clearance, that have to have a Government of India clearance. Which are these companies that state governments should have approached, in your view, haven't?
If something doesn't have any problem for states, it's one of the good vaccine, and it is been recognized by WHO. Like that, other vaccines are also recognized, like Johnson & Johnson is there. Other vaccines are also there. And many more are also coming. They are in pipeline. So actually, Pfizer and Moderna, they have become much bigger than their size right now. They have the brand value, they have gained much bigger than their size.
No, but Dr. Sheikh, that doesn't answer the question of this problem that state governments are facing. Effectively, it's the government of India to be doing its job on vaccine procurement here. And increasingly, state governments, they have done this in the duration of the past 4 weeks, ever since this was decentralized starting 1st of May. And they've hit an absolute roadblock. Let me please hold the line as you take into account other views on this here as well. We have Dr. Anand Bhan, researcher at the Global Health Biotechs and Health Policy here with us. Dr. Bhan, given the fact that it's been 1 month that state governments have been struggling with floating global tenders, trying for an independent procurement of vaccine, that hasn't happened. There is no precedence to that happening either. It's always for the central government to procure, and then for the state governments to decide where to distribute within their own geographical territory.
Yes, hi. Thank you for having me. Yes, absolutely. So this has become a challenge, and it's been a concern over the last almost a year, this whole issue around vaccination policy and decisions. Even last year, there's been this thread of a lack of clarity around how decisions are taken, because there's been a lack of transparency and, in fact, accountability as well. If you can trace it back all the way to regulatory decisions made about vaccines which were in clinical trials last year. And in many ways, that thread has continued to now. What the court, I think, has been also saying is that, what is the rationale for some of these decisions? What is the data on which it is based? What were the kind of inputs which went into making these decisions? And is asking the government to lay those out. And I think that is a fair ask. In a pandemic, one realizes that there are a lot of constraints. One also realizes that there is a supply constraint. There is not too many vaccines available globally. But, decisions have been taken, and there must be some thought attached to them. What is often not clear is what was the kind of thinking behind these decisions, and why were those decisions made as compared to other choices. And especially when there are choices around procurement, which should be centralized versus being allowed to be decentralized in a way that state governments are competing with each other. Private sector is also one of the competitors, where pricing has such a diversity of availability, anywhere from 250 to free to all the way up to 1800. I saw yesterday, where people are struggling to get slots, and yet there are also concerns about some degree of misapprehension about vaccines in rural areas. So there needs to be a coherence of policy, and that is for certainly the central government to drive at the time of a pandemic. So I think these are fair questions of the court to ask. And
yes, this coherence in policy is something that the Supreme Court has asked for as well, to throw more light. Dr. Bhan, Dr. Sheikh, please stay on with us because we're also going to be taking you through on what the Supreme Court has done today on this, effectively pulling up the central government here for this vaccine policy, or what we've seen play out since January here, especially for the 18+ group, the phase 3 that opened up since May this year. Now, they're saying that this decision here to provide part of the population vaccines free of cost and then charge the others is arbitrary and irrational. So those are the words that the Supreme Court has used for India's vaccine policy. The top court here says, in asking the government now to provide these details of how many vaccines were procured, the money that was spent here on this, on the Covishield, the Covaxin, and the Sputnik V as well now, which is the latest entrant here to this entrant to the system. The court has also asked the centre now for how it plans to go ahead to move forward to vaccinate the rest of the population, asking the states whether they are planning to vaccinate people free of cost or not. So what really is the next step ahead as well? Dr. Bhan, would you like to add to that? This is what in fact was your last point, was that there is incoherence and that the Supreme Court says this has been arbitrary. There's nothing on paper here what can be called a well-formulated vaccination policy, and therefore they're asking for more details from the central government on this.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, of course, there must be thinking behind it. There is also senior experts involved in the decisions. But as I was saying earlier, because there is a lack of transparency, one doesn't really understand what is the rationale for some of these decisions. Also because many of these decisions are very unique. You don't see a decentralized procurement almost anywhere else in the world. You don't see a diversity of price points. You don't see the situation where you open it up for a particular population segment, 18 to 45 in our case, And then there is, a lack of availability in many places. There are concerns around equity. There are concerns around a tech-based approach, which, makes it difficult for people without access to technology to even register themselves. And a lack of clarity, again, on what are the enablers for those population segments. So I think the time is ripe now. I think we're now on the downward cusp, hopefully, of a second wave, but it's the time to fix things. We all know vaccination is a major priority, and hopefully if we clarify on some of these things, we will have a more efficient system of vaccination.
To get in more clarity, and also with the Supreme Court here saying that this was an announcement of 35,000 crores of union budget allocation to the vaccination drive here, and where are the figures on how much has been bought, how much of that that budget that has been used, how much is left, and what's the way ahead here? And it takes the Supreme Court here to say this to the central government, to bring in that clarity. Dr. Gul Rasheed, basis what we've heard from the Supreme Court in pulling up the central government here, saying that this seems like an arbitrary plan. We need more clarity. This is a huge embarrassment for the central government here.
Not at all. Supreme Court is the constitutional structure of this country, and so is the government of India. And both are working for the welfare of India. They have all the rights to ask, and they are executing that. Both, let it be the government of India, let it be the Supreme Court, both are having the same target, and the target is the well-being of people of India. So both are striving in their own direction, and when the Honorable Court has asked us, we will give them everything in written, in detail, so that it will lead to much more clarity, and no politics will be there. I think it's a very good move of Supreme Court to stop the politics.
Absolutely, but Dr. Sheikh, it's a question of this information that should have already been in the public domain. I mean, you don't need the Supreme Court taking to task our central government and saying, be clear about the vaccine policy, be clear about budgetary allocations or what has been spent where. This is information that belongs to the public domain, and it's not been there.
No, it's not like that. In a time of crisis, the government doesn't look at how much money is being spent. Sometimes we also accept even the higher rates for international players because we want vaccines right here, right now. So whatever the cost is there, so eventually, definitely the CAG would have also taken the things into account, and it's good that before them only the Supreme Court is asking. So that's the usual procedure, and that is taking place. But you should not forget that right now, government of India is doing everything to bring more and more vaccines for Indians. So let it be on any price. Price doesn't matter here.
Yes, Dr. Sheikh, that sounds very good, and of course we're expecting the same here to happen to rescue India, so to say, from this ongoing crisis, vaccine shortage. It's also important here to note that while the country begins to unlock in different phases, while the COVID-19 numbers are being pulled down, the second wave, part recovery that is being seen here, but we need to open up at a time when the population is protected and those vaccine jabs that need to be given at the soonest. Appreciate both experts speaking with us here on this, Dr. Bhan, Dr. Sheikh. We'll have to leave it at that.